Hi everyone, Ben here with PARCO Studio. We're back at our West Marin site doing some tree evaluation. We met with our arborist today to mainly look at the Douglas fir trees on the property, but he was kind enough to point out some other species of trees just so that we know what they are. Mostly we're looking at the health of these Doug fir trees, and then also want to understand what their root systems do so that we can really design our foundation for the home around what the trees are going to need. We don't want to damage the trees because they're pretty terrific part of this site, and we certainly don't want them falling on our house or our neighbors' houses. So we need to be careful really how we lay out our foundation, where we're cutting into the earth, where we're using maybe drilled piers as a foundation system in order to avoid damaging the roots of these trees. So we're going to get into it, walk around the property a little bit, and take a closer look at what he taught us. So we met with Kent from Arbor Science today. Kent is one of our local experts, an arborist. He's worked for the Marin County Fire Department. He's been on location in Alaska to do forestry assessments. Really an expert in his field. What he's taught us about these Douglas fir trees is that the root systems are pretty shallow. Most of the roots occur within the first 3 feet of topsoil, which sort of surprised me given how huge these trees are, and that really you only need to maintain about 3 times the trunk diameter before you can begin to sort of excavate. And so if we take a look at this tree here, we've got about a 48-inch diameter trunk, which means that's 4 feet, so 4 times 3 is 12. So we can go about 12 feet from the trunk of this tree in any direction, and that really wants to be our kind of protection zone. And beyond that, if we need to do some cutting of the soil for a foundation or a basement, we can start to do that. We've taken a look and actually measured out in this direction 12 feet and still see some pretty beefy sized roots pretty close to the surface. Kent's going to come back and do an assessment of our 2 primary Doug firs. He actually drills like about an 1/8 inch diameter hole into the tree using this special German designed instrument that tells you the health of the tree kind of through its rings, if you will. So he's going to assess those 2 trees for us. I think when we have him back, we're going to check to see, hey, does this 12-foot rule, this kind of 3 times the tree diameter, apply to this particular tree? Because one of the things we're finding is, again, when I measure out here, I see roots beyond 12 feet that are sizable, maybe 8 or 10-inch diameter roots. And again, we want to be really careful that we're not going to damage these trees with our foundation of our home. So when we have him out to do the tree assessment on these other ones, we'll check on a few of these as we get a little bit more information about what we see on the ground here in relationship to where we plan to put the building. So one of the things Ken taught us was that when we see a Doug fir tilting the way this one is, that's a problem. It's evidence that the roots are either cracked or pulling out, and that tree's not going to survive. So we have one here and we've got another one over here. Neither of these trees are actually on our property, but they're close, and so we'll have to address these trees in particular. This one really looks like it's kind of ready to go. So Ken pointed out this bay tree on the property, which we really have enjoyed, mostly because it has these really lovely bay leaves that he can use for cooking. But he said that the fire department's going to make us remove this tree. It's too much of a fire hazard. These are pretty oily, and so they can really go up pretty quickly in a fire. So we'll be taking this tree out. Unfortunately, it's a beautiful tree, but we may be harvesting these leaves before we do so and dry them out. We probably have enough bay leaves for the rest of our lives. We've got a little madrone forest on the property. These are pretty little trees, maybe 2-inch diameter, but cute little trees. They have this really pretty bark on them. The bark on a madrone sort of sloughs off and you get the smooth finish. These aren't super healthy. They've got some spots on them. They're losing their green. Kent tells us that this is a fungus of some sort, and so we could spray these trees and sort of get them a little healthier if we wanted. He also tells us that we can we can basically pick these things out with the excavator bucket, and if we want to move them, we can move them to a different location. This is kind of where the house is going to be, and so we've got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's probably at least a dozen of these here, which we might, again, once we've got some machinery on site, scoop these up and locate them in some area and maybe bring them back, get them a little bit healthier. So these are kind of a nice to have, beautiful little trees. And you know, they can get big and they live a long time. So, you know, this might be a little time marker for us. So in between this little Doug fir and this madrone tree, we've got a California hazelnut. Kent pointed this out to us. We plucked a little nut off of it earlier. It was pretty hard, not roasted obviously. I don't think there are any more, but we do have another one of these trees over there, so we might see if that one has any on it. This is that other hazelnut tree. I did find one of those little nuts here, so this thing's covered in a little sheath of sort of fleshy, leafy material, and it's got some little pokey bits on it. You peel that off and you've got a hazelnut. So why don't we check this one out, take a closer look. Peel this guy. There you go. California hazelnut, raw, hard as a rock. Pretty astringent. And we'll probably get maybe a dozen out of these in a year. So I don't think we'll be doing any hazelnut butter. So aside from these big mature Doug firs on site, we've got some little saplings as well. Kent tells us that these grow about a foot to 18 inches a year. And what's neat is you can see how they're growing. You can tell by looking at these trees, these yearly increments. We've got a little green at the top, so that's this year. And then from here to this next major set of branches, that's a year. And then we come down another maybe 16 or 18 inches and we're at another year. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years old. I guess these, you know, even the big ones, they grow about the same rate, 12 to 18 inches a year. And so these trees aren't as old as we thought they were. Kent thought that these sprouted up after a fire that came through here in about 1943. So we've got 100-year-old trees, 1943. Someone can do the math on that and see if that works out, but in theory that's what's happening here. So this is the base of one of these big Doug firs. What we notice is that there's a chunky sized woodpecker that has been going at the bottom of this thing. We asked Kent about that, and he said, well, what's happening is the bark here is dead, so there's some wood boring insects of some sort that are living inside of there. He actually took his hammer and knocked on this a bit to see if it felt really hollow. He did say that this concave area, this slot here that you see, might be indicating that there's basically some rotting, unhealthy wood at the base of this trunk. So this is where he's going to take his tool in a few weeks and bore into this tree, again about an 1/8 inch diameter hole, to sort of see what the different layers are doing. And that'll tell us if this is a tree that we're going to be able to keep or if we have to let this one go. Again, this is one of these big sort of entryway trees that we'd like to keep. He said that we can water it, we can fertilize it. There's definitely things that we can do to kind of help keep it healthy. You can't do anything about the wood that's already dead, but you can keep the rest of it as healthy as possible. So we may lean into that a little bit and see if we can keep this one alive, because it sort of means a lot to us already. We did speak with Kent about the driveway here and this kind of crossing between the two Doug fir trees. That one's out of the way enough. It's already had its roots trimmed a bit. Not going to be a problem for the driveway. This one, however, it's got a root that comes right here and is probably pretty shallow, and so I think the trick will be, how do we get the driveway to bridge this area? One of the things we've talked about is literally making a bridge, having a stretch of concrete driveway and a stretch of concrete driveway, and bridging them in between with some metal grating, some kind of grippy steel that can span that distance, right? So that we don't have to excavate down, because when we do a driveway, say that's 6 inches or more of concrete plus some gravel, and before you know it, you've excavated down a foot, and these roots are right here at the surface almost, and so we don't want to do that. So I think we're going to work on designing some kind of little bridging element at the apex of the driveway here that helps us get over that root without doing any damage.